Sure. So the question is, the individual that asked the question is the immigrant himself, and he's wondering why he should support immigration reform when there's a lot of unemployment in our country, and his kids are educated, and that they're going to be wanting jobs, and doesn't it create competition to have immigrants in our country, is the gist of the question. I would say a couple of things. I think, first of all, I'll explain exactly what we've been advocating for or endorsing, so we're clear in terms of the position of world relief, and the position also that a lot of Christian leaders have taken on immigration. The first is, I don't think anyone's for illegal immigration. I don't think anyone thinks it's a good idea if someone either crosses the border illegally or overstays their visa, which is about 40 to 50% of cases. So whenever we talk about immigration reform, the first and priority for our government is that they have to ensure that there is security. So whether that's making sure the border is secure or making sure that employers have the right mechanisms to verify the legal status of their workers. And we have to give our government all the tools they need in order to make sure that people don't immigrate illegally, that people don't try to cross the border or overstay their visas. There have to be those mechanisms in place. So that's one thing that we think is very important. The second thing, is that if we're going to make it harder for immigrants to enter illegally, we actually have to make it easier for them to enter legally. And right now, our immigration laws are so restricted that there's only 5,000 visas available for someone who's a low-skilled immigrant worker to come into the United States and work a job. 5,000 visas per year. That's the number of immigrants that came through Ellis Island in the 1920s per day. And yet that's the number of visas we have available today for someone who's low skilled to come into this country and work. And so right now, a lot of times people tell me, well, the people today should come the legal way, just like my ancestors did. But that's pretty much like comparing apples and oranges, because before the 1920s, if your parents came from Germany or from Italy or from Ireland or Poland, and they came through Ellis Island or touched somewhere in the United States, 99% of them basically came, and there was no visa back then. There was no illegal way for someone to come. And so right now we have a system that there are restrictions. You have to have a visa in order to come legally to the United States. Back then, before 1920s, there was no such system. And so right now we have laws on the books where it's extremely difficult for someone to get into the United States. And our laws actually haven't changed in about 20 to 30 years, significantly reformed. And so right now we have a system that's created a lot of brokenness, I think, in our communities. It's estimated that there are about 11 million undocumented individuals who are here. I imagine here in Bend, Oregon, that there's probably a good number of them living right here in your community, either as farm workers or as people who work in the ski industry, or I don't know, but they're everywhere. It's not just in Los Angeles or Chicago. And so one of the things we have said is, if we're going to make it harder for immigrants to enter illegally, there has to be some way for immigrants who want to come here and work to come in the legal way, not through the back door, but through the front door. And if our visas right now are so restricted, there has to be more flexible ways for farmers to hire either the workers that they need or for individuals to come in and work with authorization, not doing it through the back door. And the third thing we've said is, okay, if we fix the way, enforcement at the borders and employment verification, and then we create more legal avenues for them to come, well, what do we do with the people who are here? And that, I think, has been the biggest point of debate. Like I said before, there's around 11 million people who are here without documentation, and the challenge has been, what do we do with them as a country? When you actually look at this pool of people, half of them have actually been in this country for more than 10 years. So they're not people who just recently crossed the border. In fact, border crossings now are at a net zero because of our kind of poor economy. A lot of people haven't crossed over because they feel like they can't find jobs. So over the past couple of years, it's pretty much been at a net zero. And so some people have said, well, why don't we just mass deport all of them? There's 11 million people here. I think we should just, pack them up, ship them up, and just get them out of our country. A democracy has actually never done that in its history. I don't know if we should be the first one to try. There is financially a lot of cost. I think there's a lot of humanitarian reasons for why we shouldn't do this either. So that's not something we would support. Other people have said, well, why don't we just grant them an amnesty? So let's just give them automatic citizenship. Forget the fact that they committed immigration offenses, they're working, whatever, and just allow them a free pass to live here. I don't think that's a good idea either, because immigration laws were broken. I think there has to be some kind of admission of the fact that laws were broken, and there has to be some kind of penalty. So I'm not for an amnesty either. So a middle-of-the-ground approach that a lot of people have said is a good way to go about this is, why don't we, for any of us who commit some kind of civil offense, we have to pay some kind of penalty or fine. So whenever we speed down the road, we pay a speeding ticket or whatever. So a lot of people have said, well, there has to be some kind of registration with the government. So why don't we get these individuals to come forward to actually register with the government, and then in the process of registration, pay some kind of penalty. It's been debated, $1,000 to $3,000. It'll be more for additional children. And then basically create a probationary period where you have to be employed, you basically have to pay all your back taxes, you have to learn English, and then within a certain period of time, if you meet certain criteria and pay the penalties, that you could eventually earn a green card. And so the Senate actually last year debated a bill, and they actually passed it out in June of 2013. And basically the Senate bill says that there's a 10-year probationary period for undocumented immigrants. You have to pay $2,000 to $3,000 in fines. You have to register with the government. You can't be unemployed for longer than 2 months. And if you meet those criteria within a 10-year period, then eventually you can potentially be eligible to get a green card if you so desire. But you can't cut to the front of the line. You can't do anything like that. So it will be a temporary probationary status. Now, the House hasn't actually done anything yet. The Senate, we're halfway there with them having actually passed a bill. The House hasn't passed anything yet. The reason why I think this is good for our economy and good for our society in general is that, most of the people that we're talking about that would potentially, get some kind of legal status if they pay penalties and meet criteria are people who, like I said before, have been working here for longer than 10 years. A lot of them are probably in jobs in construction or the farmer industry and other places where they're filling a niche, I think, in our economy. And so I know there's a concern about, competition of resources and things like that, but I really think that our economy is not necessarily, a set pie where immigrants take up a chunk of the pie and Americans have all the other jobs, but I actually think by immigrants being here, it enlarges the pie. So, a lot of people have said, well, if there's immigrant workers here, it provides Americans more of an opportunity to do other things or to focus on things that they don't necessarily have to do because they're hiring immigrants to either clean their homes or cut their lawn or things like that. So I do think, whatever immigration laws we have, obviously, I think companies, they have to hire Americans first, that should be their primary concern. And all of our immigration laws have said that is, your primary duty is to hire an American. And it's only when you can't find an American that you can hire an immigrant worker. I think in certain industries, it's a little bit more challenging. For example, in the farming industry and maybe even the construction industry, oftentimes they've had to hire people quickly and people who want to do the work. And so they've hired immigrant workers pretty quickly. But what we're talking about is the ability for them to do it the legal way, not illegally as it's been happening. So immigration reform hopefully would create a situation where we enforce the border and we have security mechanisms in place, but we also make it easier for employers to hire the people that they want in a way that's right, which is the lawful manner. And then eventually, allowing the people who are here to rectify their status somehow in our country.